A warm welcome. Such a treat to see all of you, those folks who are here in person, folks who are online. And let's see, announcements. So we have a brunch here at the Vihara on November 10th, a couple weeks from now, right after the Dhamma talk on the Sunday. And we have the curso en español, Imágenes del Ser. En línea con el Centro Zen de San Francisco, a Spanish course, beginning in November. And we have a precept ceremony, which is always a big, joyful occasion when somebody takes their commitment to the ethical vows and to taking refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And that will be a hybrid event, so everybody can participate. Everyone's welcome to come and have some mudita, some empathetic joy for Jesse Peters and Todd, who will be taking their precepts together on the 24th. And I think that's it for announcements for now. We'll go ahead and settle into the usual program, which is about 10 minutes of guided meditation and about a 30-minute or so Dhamma talk. And sometime at the end there, maybe 15 minutes or so for questions, reflections, comments. So for today's meditation, I think that what I'd like us to do is to practice a mindfulness of breathing with the intention of really trying to develop the ability to stay with the whole of the breath, even the spaces in between the breaths. So I'll give you a bit of guidance for that, and we'll see how that goes. So you can begin perhaps with just some movement, getting into your meditation posture. Really loosening up whatever tension you can release at this time. And allowing the body to come into a balanced position. Upright, if you're sitting, or aligning the spine, if you're lying down. Relaxing the belly and really allowing the body to settle right here in this time and place. Slowly moving the attention up the torso. All the way up through the neck, finding that alignment. Softening the eyes. And perhaps by now, the sensations of the breath breathing the body have started to come into your awareness. And you can rest the mind on those sensations wherever you find them. In the nostrils or the throat, or the chest or the belly. Any place is okay. Being curious about the sensations of the breath breathing the body. Perhaps paying particular attention to any pauses that are happening between the breaths. No need to change them, just observing those natural moments of stillness. Having found those pauses between the breaths, perhaps you also notice the start of each part of the breath. Those moments when there is a shift from stillness into movement. Resting the mind on sensations of the breath and allowing it to ride along the length of each breath from the start until the next pause. So that brings us to the end of the meditation portion of the program. And if you have any reflections or questions about that, you can ask them after the Dhamma talk. Have all of time for that, plenty of time for that, I hope, at the end. But for now, I'm going to shift to the Dhamma talk. And then begin, as always, with the homage and refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. You're welcome to chant along if you like, keeping your mics muted if you're online. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. One of the key aspects of Buddhism is taking death as our teacher. Each one of us is going to die. There's no question about that. Good friend of mine, Norma, my good friend, was talking about, she's telling me about a fundraiser that they were doing for one of the Zen teachers many years ago. This is probably back in the early 90s. And she said, he started out right away by saying, you're all going to die. And I thought, oh no, does he have to start there? But indeed, sometimes it's a good idea to start there. What does it mean to take death and dying as our teacher about living in a wise way? For me, what I've seen is that it can really shift your perspective when you're willing to take it in a profound, real, personal, intimate way. When my dear friend and teacher Blanche Hartman, who was the first woman abbot of San Francisco Zen Center, was dying, I went to go visit her in the hospice, and she was in a double room, so there was an empty bed next to her, and then she had a whole table full of flowers that people had sent. And I said, wow, look at that. She said, yeah, look at that. I said, what does that mean to you? And I thought she would say something like beauty or, the fleeting nature of life. Flowers are often used as a metaphor in Zen Buddhist practice for impermanence. And she said, it means love. It means care. That's every one of those flowers is here because somebody cared. So we can really bring home some of the most important meanings of life. Death can. The Buddha himself put a lot of emphasis on this. There's a beautiful sutta, and I don't have the number handy, so if somebody knows the number, you can put it in the chat there, or you can call it out if you're here in the room and you know. But there's a beautiful sutta in which the Buddha is with a large gathering of monastics, and he asks them, how do you think about death? How do you practice with that? And they went around the room, and various people said, somebody said, oh, I think, I might not live to see the end of this year, or I might not live to see the end of this week, or I might not live to see the end of this day. He was like, yeah, that's not quite reaching it. And then somebody said, because this is right after the meal, said, I might not have lived to see the end of that one bite. I might not live to see the end of this next sip of water. Ah, the Buddha said, yes, like that close. Like that close. Because together with that inevitability of death comes this question of not knowing when or how. And that's also important. But the thing about the aspect of death that I want to talk about today, or the aspect of dying, is that it doesn't let us get away with our delusions. Our delusions about being permanent, our delusions about invincibility, right? Oftentimes. Sometimes we say only young people think that they're invincible, but that's not true, actually. there can be this idea that I'm okay, I've been well all along, everything will be fine. Or a grandeur, right? Some kind of idea. I think if we think about the scale of space-time and what we know today about the cosmos, and we think about the scale of a human life, like, wow. That one drop in the waterfall, a tremendous raging waterfall of time. Or our ideas about wealth or fame. Last week we talked a little bit, I think it was last week, we talked a little bit about that, about thinking somehow that our material things will take care of us or will leave some lasting mark on the world. So faced with all this, then we have to say, okay, then what, right? Then how does that become a teaching? Because for a while there, I was a chaplain. I was a chaplain in the hospital and in hospice. And what I saw is that there are typically 3 responses to knowing with some degree of certainty that death is close. And one of them is fear, just outright terror. And one of them is withdrawal. People can just turn away from everything, try to ignore, or they get shut down because they are overwhelmed. But there's a third option. There's a third way that we can go. And some folks actually, I want to say, experience all 3 of these at various points in their process. It depends on how much time you have and where your mind is at that point in your life. But there is a third option, and it's this growth in wisdom. This growth in our ability to wisely know the nature of reality and to find our harmony with that, our peace with that. So I'll tell you a story about when I was in hospice. When I was a hospice chaplain, I was so we, as chaplains, often are, we're interfaith chaplains. We are folks who are attending to the spiritual care of folks from any religious tradition or no religious tradition, or anybody. We are expected to be able to meet people where they are, wherever that is. And it was my last day, actually, of being a chaplain for this particular organization that I was working with. It was a really good, very heart-centered hospice, but I was going on to do some more studies. And so I was having lunch with my fellow chaplains and found out that there was a woman who wasn't one of my patients on my list particularly, was on the list of a friend of ours who was out sick that day, who was apparently very, very close to dying. And so she was living in a assisted living home, and they wanted one of us to come out. They wanted the chaplain to come out, and her chaplain that had been taking care of her for months was not available. So I said, well, I'm on my way to go turn in my computer and my badge, and she's kind of on my way, and I'll go see her as my last visit. And turns out this woman was Jewish, and I know very little about the Jewish tradition, honestly. It's one of the spiritual traditions that I've only really had very, very little exposure to. But I thought, okay, all right, we'll go, we'll see what's happening with her. So I arrived there at her place and talked to the nurse at the desk, and the nurse says, well, you know, she seems pretty comfortable right now. We're not sure really how close she is, actually. We're kind of reassessing. And this is normal. This happens, you know. We think they're quite close, and then they might have more days left. But she said, go right in, go ahead and go in and talk to her. So I step into her room, and the room is very dark, and there's a hospital bed on one side of the room and a couch on the other side of the room. It's this kind of place, a very, I felt like it's very thoughtful, heartfelt kind of hospice environment or assisted living environment. But I walked in and I thought, oh my gosh, are they going to let her die on the couch? Because there she's lying there on the couch. And they might in fact have done that if that's where she felt like she was ready to go. And she's all alone there in the room. And so I walk up to her and I lean over. And it seems like she might be asleep. I'm not sure because the room is very dark and she's very quiet lying there on the couch. And I lean over to see if she's asleep. And she opens her eyes and she looks at me. And we have a little bit of an exchange, but it's clear that, or it's apparent to me that she's not going to be able to have a conversation. She's not quite mentally able to talk kind of fluently. But she does ask me a question. She says, why here? She looks at me and she says, why here? Like, why am I here? I say, me? Why here? She says, yeah, why here? She wants to know, why am I here? Because she doesn't recognize me, right? And so I think about it for a second and I say, well, I came to give you a blessing. And she says, oh, okay. Oh, yes. All right. So she holds out her two hands. She grabs my two hands. Okay, time for a blessing. And I put my head down for a moment to think about what I want to say, right? Because I'm thinking about what would be appropriate for her in her Jewish tradition, or this person who I don't really know that well, or I'm thinking for a moment. And as I'm there with my head down and she's holding my two hands quite warmly, strongly, she starts saying, blessing. And I say, yes, blessing, because I'm thinking about it. But then she starts saying blessing. And I say blessing. And she says blessing, 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 blessing. And she gets so animated. And she's almost sitting up in her bed. Blessing, blessing, blessing. So in that moment, maybe her dying hours, she's giving me a blessing. What a tremendous generosity of heart, right? She's not lying there worried about what I'm going to say to her. She's all about the connection. And I'm blessing her too. And we have this beautiful connection in that moment with just the one word, right? And this intention that just flows from her. So beautiful. Yeah? So we have this moment of meeting as people, of meeting as a moment, this fleeting moment that won't come again. I will never see her again, even if she lives beyond that day. And that's all right. That's still beautiful. What's happening right here, right now. So in that moment, she demonstrated her wisdom, her knowing, right? That the giving and the connection and the intimacy and the being present for what's here right now was the most important thing, was the thing that brought life to that moment of life, because she's not dead yet, she's still alive. She's still very much alive in that moment. So it's a beautiful moment. And I think about those moments that when you know that you're going to lose everything you know, when you know really that all the things you think you own and all the people that you know and this body that you think belongs to you will be gone. Then it's just this moment and the intimacy and clarity of this moment. That is what makes it worth living. That's what we have to work with. That's what we actually have in this life. It's all we've ever had, every moment of life, but we get confused about that. So we learn, if we learn something from dying, we learn about this living fully right here. Blessing and receiving blessings from what's right in front of us. So then we see also how generosity comes forth, right? From that knowing, from that deep acknowledgement of the reality of impermanence and how that brings us relief. Relief right in the midst of whatever is happening in these bodies and minds. Relief from the grasping at things that are ultimately unfulfilling. But having the fulfillment of the connection. Which is really expressing that deeper truth. That it's not just impermanence, it's also interconnection, interdependence. That is happening in every moment. So I hope that death becomes a great teacher for you. That death and dying can open up your heart of wisdom and generosity and recognizing the love and the blessings that are right here in your life. And thank you. That's what I wanted to share today. A little bit of a short one today, but it leaves us a little bit more time for reflection and questions.
Really appreciate what you said today and really resonated with me. And my mother passed a few years ago, and I feel like it really, her life trajectory didn't go exactly the way that she planned, and it really just kind of opened my eyes up to, you never know what can happen, and you have to kind of take each moment as it is. And I appreciate that gift that she gave to me, and thank you for talking about these things.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful. I'm glad that you are really receiving that gift that she gave to you. Yeah. Okay, don't everybody jump in at once now. Yes, Brad.
The ordinariness of it all. Just to, like, even just with the breath, the breath itself isn't looking for the next breath. You know, it's like, I'm looking for the next, I want to establish the next moment of experience, and I want to make it right. I want it to fit a certain paradigm of what I think will bring happiness, and to know that none of that ever works. That's part of what we have to give up, is that constantly fabricating, and just resting back into the stillness that is never absent. It's like the moonlight is always shining somewhere, even if it's behind the clouds or covered by the shadow of something or other. And what was a very strange thing happened when I was diagnosed. It's like almost 5 years ago now, just about 5 years ago. Was that it was like a burden was taken off. Like there was no more wondering, gee, am I going to die? Yeah, you are, And so it was like, it was kind of a relief in a funny way that a lot of the mind's wandering and wondering about, yeah, well, will I have enough money for late retirement years and all that kind of stuff? Because I was, it's not a concern. And then the challenge, and there's lots of challenges, but the real challenge just becomes to deepen and open the heart and open connection, because it's really, part of you maybe wants to go off to a cave on permanent retreat, but I really think that it's in relationship that our heart needs to grow. Especially because you start to recognize that all the stuff that might be unresolved around the heart, around the citta, if we don't resolve that, that's what's driving the bus. When it gets triggered, that's what comes up and takes over. And that only comes up in relationship. It doesn't come up in a cave when you're by yourself. So in the cave, you think you're fine. On retreat, you think you're fine. And then you come back and somebody says something and it hits you the wrong way, and so it's like there's luggage. So here's one set of luggage with all of our greed, anger, and delusion. There's another set of luggage with the boundless qualities. Which set of luggage do you want to take with you?
Brad, may I?
Yes.
That about going to a cave, I think right? There's a very funny joke about a man, as a person who goes off to practice in a cave for a long period of time, and he's there like 10 years practicing patience. He's trying to learn the perfection of patience, right? Patience is said to be one of the perfections, or the paramitas, one of the qualities that are helpful in the practice. And he goes to a cave for a long period of time, and he's practicing patience, and he's like, yep, getting really good at this. And then somebody walks by the cave, and she sees him in there, and she yells, and she calls out, she says, what are you doing in there? And he says, I'm practicing the perfection of patience. And she says, well, what good is that? And he says, get the hell out of here. Right? So much for the perfection of patience. All right. And, just as you're alluding to there, it's like, it's in relationship, it's in those places of encountering one another that we really grow in our hearts, that we really find our way through our delusions and our confusion about life. Yes. Wonderful. Thanks for the sharing, Brad, and much, much, much appreciated holding you in our hearts. Claudia.
Hace 4 años, maestra, yo estando sana en casa, pensando que al otro día iba a estar bien, como todos los días, ir al trabajo y tal. Pero resulta que hubo un evento donde se meten gente a mi casa y me amagan, y en ese momento pensé que era mi último momento de vida. Y yo solo dije, no voy a salir de aquí. Yo ya no veía que iba a vivir, ¿no? Yo sentía la muerte inminente, sentía que pendía de un hilo, sobre todo por las amenazas, los gritos y todo, ese trauma. Y lo único que pensé en ese momento tan corto, en ese trayecto de lucidez de la vida y la muerte, realmente no me importaba mucho la muerte en ese momento. Lo único que me importaba era ese trayecto de no sufrir. Y entonces lo único que hice fue calmarme y estar consciente en ese momento y desearle bendiciones a estas personas que me estaban amagando con una pistola, con un machete, y yo decía que les vaya bien, tomen todo lo que quieran, que sus familias esto les sea beneficioso, llévense lo que quieran, muchachos, váyanse en paz. Yo empecé a decir tantas bendiciones para ellos, no para nosotros, no para mí ni para mi pareja, sino para ellos, y decía, esténse bien, ya si me iban a matar y todo, bueno, está bien, pero decía, muchachos, váyanse, hagan todo, llévense lo que quieran, que sus familias con esto tengan lo que puedan, y si quieren, pues déjenos en paz, ¿no? Pero eso de desearle bendición, como usted decía lo último, con esta mujer, ¿no? Cuando uno se encuentra ya en este momento que no puedo explicar, lo único que surge es, como lo dijo Brad, no hay nada que cargar, es desearle lo mejor a quien se quede, y tú te quedas con eso, ¿no? O sea, ya no importa. Y a partir de ahí, mi vida cambió. Para mí ya no es lo mismo.
Sí, sí.
Gracias.
Gracias por compartir eso, Claudia.
Uh-huh.
Voy a traducir para para
Ujú.
los demás. So Claudia is saying that she, about 4 years ago, she was living her everyday life and thinking, one day to the next, and you go to work and you do what you're doing. And then there was a break-in in her house, an armed robbery. And some people came in with a gun and a machete and were threatening her and her partner. And she said, in that moment, she really wasn't so concerned about dying. She was concerned about not suffering. And what that did was that it turned to her wishing well of those people. And she said, please take anything you want, may you and your families be well, or take whatever you need. It's all here. And, we're not going to fight you. We're not going to try to harm you in any way. Please just do whatever you have to do to take whatever you need to take, and so on. And that in that moment, she can't really explain what it is that happened, but that she saw, clearly something about the relief of actually understanding that death is going to come, and that allowed her to turn outward, and kind of similar to offering blessings like the Jewish lady. So that's what she wanted to share with us, that she's echoing in a way that it's possible, this experience that she had, which was very difficult, but in other ways it taught her a lot. ¿Eso lo capta, Claudia? Sí. Okay, bien. That's what she wanted to share.
As you were talking, I remember my mother died some years ago, and she was very much a very much Christian, and a very simple, non-intellectual, but it's hard to explain well without making it too simple. But at any rate, I always thought if my mother didn't have to fight for life, she would have died. But she was one of those people who kept fighting and kept fighting, as compared to my father, who had to have a reason for living. And he died not too long after he retired. But she finally said, it's one of the few times she was not ignorant. She was not smart at all, but she was not an intellectual. So these were not things she contemplated or thought about or whatever. But she said, and this was very shortly before she died, she probably, she was still fighting it, but still, I think she finally said, I'm ready to die. And she would never have said that before. Never have said, even thought about she was ready. She was not going to give up. And she did have to fight to live. And she said, but I can't imagine not being here. And I've, as I've gotten older and recognized that I am closer and closer, if all plays out by age, of course, we still never know, but I just can't imagine. And I know that's part of the path, and that's part of the journey, and so forth. But that's where it stops for me. I can't imagine. And part of that is I don't have a strong sense of what follows this body dying. And maybe that's part of the journey as well, but it is an unknown. Even if I have a strong belief what's there, I still recognize that it's a strong belief.
Yes.
And it's so certainly not a certainty. But thank you for bringing this out. It's certainly something to delve into.
Mm. Mm. Yes. Thank you for that reflection there, Julia. You know, it's yeah, this aspect of fighting also, you know, at the end, or wanting to stay alive or do everything that's possible. It's also, isn't that something to criticize? Also, it's kind of like one thing that that also I think becomes abundantly clear, seeing many different people die, is we don't know why they're here. You know, there's a karmic reason. There's some reason why they are present in the world, whether it's for their own karmic unfolding or there's some connection. As you know, people, there was several people, but one man in particular who I remember very much was like, no, I'm waiting for my grandchild to be born. And he might be born today and he might be born 2 weeks from now, but that's what I'm waiting for. And he was quite literally waiting for that. Like he died within a couple of days of that child being born, you know. And that was it. It was important to him. And there was some reason why they needed to be in the world at the same time, those two. And didn't really matter, you know, his body was going to carry on. His body was, goodness knows, according to the doctor, there's like impossible to say why he's still with us, but for that thing, for that reason of needing that thing having to happen. So yeah, we don't know why. Sometimes it's important to stay. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Julia. Hamza, I think you have your hand up. Yes. This will be the last because we're getting to the end of our time here.
Yeah, well, brought so many lessons. Your talk. Thank you very much for your talk. I want to say that ahead of time. But it brought me back to my mother's death, where she died at 37 and left. I was the eldest at 18, and it took many years of working through all of that. And I thank her for so many lessons over the years. One of the latest, it brings to mind that story of the woman who approached the Buddha, where she had lost her baby. I mean, I don't want to go into the whole story, and I think it was a sesame seed or something. Said go to house and find a grain of whatever.
Mustard seed.
Oh no, that somebody hasn't died in the household. That's what it was.
Yes.
And
you can receive a mustard seed from
the
any house
mustard
where there
seed,
hasn't
right?
been death.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, you know, to me, that's like anatta. It's like, you know, everybody's going to go through this non-self, you know, none of us are special about that. But one particular recent story was this summer where I went in where I thought was a basic procedure in the hospital. And it was for a knee replacement. You know, it's like nowadays, that's just very commonplace. Well, interestingly enough, 2.5 weeks after coming home from the hospital, within an 8-day period, I got to visit the ER 3 different times and with some very serious things, and was very, very ill for that short period of time. And at one point, and I was so calm throughout the whole process. It's like, geez, it's my practice, it's helping. And I went, well, isn't sitting in the hospital bed, isn't this interesting? Who would have guessed that this is perhaps where I'm going to make my transition, right here, right now? And it was, and of course, here I am, very healthy now. But what an interesting lesson that was. So thank you.
Thank you, Hamza. Yes. Just like that monk in the sutta from the Buddha, right? Could happen right now. And what does that mean? How does that help? How does that open and clarify? Beautiful. We are at our time, so thank you so much, everyone, for the incredible reflections and heartfelt sharings and your wisdom. your insights, your experience. It's all welcome here. May the merits, may the beneficial, energetic momentum established by our practice here today benefit all beings, known and unknown, seen and unseen, in all the realms. May we and all beings find relief from mental and physical suffering. May we realize absolute peace and wisdom in our hearts and minds. By the power of the Buddhas, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, may all beings be liberated.